If you find it almost impossible to ask for what you need, if you rehearse conversations in your head for days before you have them, if you apologize before you've even made a request, or even if you decide that it's probably not worth bringing up before you've even tried, most people will tell you that's a confidence problem, or that you're just too sensitive, or that you just need to speak up more. I want to offer you a different explanation, and it might change how you see yourself. Because what I've found, both in my own life and in years of working with people, is that the inability to ask for what you need or to stand up for yourself when it matters is almost never about confidence. It's almost always about safety. And understanding the difference between those two things is where everything starts to shift. So stay with me to the end of this video because I'm going to share the one thing that helped me understand why this was happening in my own life. And it wasn't what I expected. I want to start with trauma itself because the version most of us were taught was incomplete. When people hear the word trauma, they think of something dramatic, something obvious, something that would absolutely hold up in a story. But trauma isn't always a single event. It can be years of having your feelings dismissed. It can be a relationship where the moment you expressed a need, it was used against you. It can be a childhood where keeping the peace was how you stayed safe, where taking up space had consequences, where the adults around you were too overwhelmed or too checked out to meet your needs consistently. And what happens when a nervous system learns those lessons? When it learns that having needs leads to rejection, anger, or being ignored or being hurt, what happens is that it adapts. It gets very, very good at suppressing the need before it becomes a problem. And if having needs got you dismissed, punished, ignored, or hurt, your nervous system learned that having needs isn't safe. And it's been protecting you from that ever since. And that's not weakness. It's not a personality flaw. That is an intelligent, adaptive response that made complete sense at the time it was formed. The problem is the nervous system doesn't automatically update when the circumstances change. It keeps running the same protective pattern long after the original threat is gone. So what does this actually look like in adult life? Because most people who are living this pattern don't walk around thinking, I have trauma around my needs. They walk around thinking, I just don't like conflict. Or, I'm not good at asking for things. Or I don't want to be a burden. Or maybe it's easier just to handle it myself. Or it's probably not that important anyway. And you know what? I recognize all of those because I have said every single one of them. And what I eventually understood was that every one of those thoughts was my nervous system doing its job, keeping me safe by keeping me small. The patterns are very specific once you know what to look for. You know exactly what you need, but the words won't come when it matters. You start to ask for something and then immediately soften it. You qualify it, you apologize for it, or you talk yourself out of it entirely. When someone pushes back, even gently, you back down almost immediately. Not because you've changed your mind, but because the discomfort of holding your ground feels unbearable. You feel resentment building quietly because your needs are never getting met, but you can't quite bring yourself to name them out loud. And the thing that makes this so hard to see clearly is that it doesn't feel like trauma. It feels like you. It feels like your personality. It feels like just the way that you are. And I want to be really clear here. It's not just the way you are. And I'm not sharing this to give you something else to feel bad about. I'm sharing it because understanding where a pattern comes from is the first step to actually being able to work through it rather than just fighting yourself with it constantly. Because understanding where this came from doesn't mean you're stuck with it. It means you finally know what you're actually working with. When you think the problem is confidence, you try to fix your confidence. You tell yourself to be braver, to just say it, to stop being so sensitive, and it doesn't work because that was never the problem. When you understand that the problem is a nervous system that learned that having needs isn't safe, the work becomes completely different. It becomes about building safety. Becomes about slowly, gently updating the evidence your nervous system is working from. Becomes about compassion rather than criticism. And I noticed this in my own life when I started to look honestly at the environments where I had learned to go quiet. Where I had learned that asking for what I needed created more problems than it solved. And when I could see that clearly, when I could see that I'd been a very smart person responding to a very real set of circumstances, something shifted. The self-criticism got a little bit quieter and the curiosity got a little bit louder. And I want to be honest with you, this is not a quick fix. I'm not going to tell you that understanding this once changes everything overnight because it doesn't work that way. But here's what I noticed, both in myself and in people I've worked with. When you start to understand that this is a learned response rather than a character flaw, two things become possible that weren't possible before. The first is self-compassion, and I mean real self-compassion. Not the kind where you tell yourself you're doing your best while secretly believing that you're broken. The kind where you actually understand why you are the way you are and you stop making yourself wrong for it. The second is this. You can start to get curious about what you actually need, because here's something I found to be consistently true. You can't ask for what you need until you feel safe enough to explore and know what it is. And feeling safe enough is its own work. That's separate from the asking. Most people try to skip straight to the asking. They try to be braver in the moment, to just push through the fear and say the thing. And sometimes it does work, but more often, the reason the words won't come isn't because you're not brave enough. It's because you haven't done the internal work of getting clear on what you actually need. And you haven't yet built enough safety in your own body to hold that need without immediately dismissing it. That internal work, getting clear on your needs, understanding what it looks like when they're being met, knowing where your limits are when they're not, that's where the real shift begins, not in the conversation before the conversation happens. I want to leave you with this. If you've spent years thinking you weren't good at speaking up for yourself, if you've criticized yourself for going quiet, for not holding your ground, for always putting everyone else first, I want you to consider something. You're actually very good at staying safe. You just don't need to stay safe in the same way anymore. The patterns that keep you protected once are the same patterns that are keeping you stuck now. And the work of untangling them isn't about being braver or trying harder. It's about understanding what your nervous system learned, having some compassion for the person who learned it, and slowly, gently building a different kind of evidence. The thing that helped me understand why this was happening in my own life, I'll share that with you now. And it wasn't a therapy breakthrough or a single conversation. It was something much simpler. So it may be something worth trying out this week. The next time you notice yourself going quiet, backing down, or talking yourself out of asking for something, don't push through it. Don't try to be braver in that moment. Instead, just get curious. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I ask for this or if I stand up for myself? Not as a judgment, just as a question. Write it down if that helps, because the answer to that question will tell you more about what your nervous system learned than any amount of pushing yourself ever will. And that's where the real work starts, not in the asking, in understanding what made asking feel dangerous in the first place. So if this resonated, there's a free resource linked below, Reclaiming Yourself After Trauma and Grief, which is a good place to start if you want to go a bit deeper into this. I'll see you next Wednesday for a new video. Take care.